Hi. So I made a little bit of an oopsie daisies, and long story short, the episode of Chit Chats that you are about to watch is completely without visuals. I just simply forgot to capture them while I recorded this episode. My bad. Fortunately, I don't really think this detracts from the episode itself. These videos are kind of designed to be viewable either through literally watching them or through listening to them. So I don't think there's a lot of moments where we, really heavily rely on the visual component that we're talking about, especially considering this is mostly an auditory episode. So I don't think it'll matter too much, but I'm going to throw up a just a static image for the entire episode that hopefully will supplement the lack of moving visuals. So you get to use your imagination on this one. But yeah, stay tuned for next week when we will get back to not fucking up. It's going to be great.
So we get to
This is special.
Mm-hmm. I'll give you a nice little a cool special intro for you. All right. Well, okay.
Wait, Anthony doesn't know how to do that.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, so the way that we start Chit Chats is we go around. So I start off by saying, "Welcome back to Chit Chats, everybody. My name is Antonio," and then we go around and say, "And my name is blank." And then the last person that says it, which would be you, because you're the special guest, they would say, "And my name is blank, and let's have a chit chat." So
is that how that works?
Yeah. So you would say, "And my name is Anthony, and let's have a chit chat."
Okay.
Do you think you can handle that?
Yeah. Let me clear my throat here.
Yeah. It's okay. Just take a deep breath. Don't feel too nervous.
All right.
You got this, Anthony.
You got this.
Hey, I'm Anthony. Let's wait. Did I fuck it up already?
A little bit.
And my name is Anthony, and let's have.
And my name is Anthony. Let's have a chit chat.
Yep.
There you go.
All right.
Okay.
All right. Now who's going second? Actually, Skylar, you go second.
Oh, you okay? Yeah,
Okay,
Skylar, you can go second, and Quinton, you go third.
Yep.
My name is Skylar. Let's have a chit chat.
No, you don't say. You don't have to say we're having a chit chat.
I think we should all say and let's have a chit chat.
My name is Quinton, and let's have a chit chat. My name is Skylar, and let's have a chit chat.
Wait, actually,
let's have a chit
do
chat.
that. Let's just do that for some reason. Okay. All right. So forget everything I just said. We're all gonna say and let's have a chit chat.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Okay.
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 It's so stupid.
Okay. Welcome back to Chit Chats, everybody. My name is Antonio, and let's have a chit chat. I thought we were all gonna go.
Skylar,
I thought it was
Okay,
Skylar first.
maybe we shouldn't do
I thought it was Skylar
go
first.
second.
that. You know what? Because this is Anthony's first episode, let's not overcomplicate it. Let's just do
All right.
a normal intro. We can do the scuffed one and another one. Okay.
Sure.
So Anthony, you were the only one that's gonna say and let's have a chit chat, okay?
Like at the end, or
Yeah.
Yep.
okay.
Here we go. So it'll be me, Skylar, Quinton, and then you, Anthony.
Okay.
Welcome back to Chit Chats, everybody. My name is Antonio.
My name is Skylar.
My name is Quinton.
My name is Anthony. Let's have a chit chat.
Woo!
All right, we did
We
it.
did it.
All right,
Yeah,
cool.
baby.
Flawlessly, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That was
Flawless, yeah.
good. That was
That was
definitely
so seamless.
in the top 5 Chit Chats intros of all time. So
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Well,
I can cut out the silence. It's okay. I'm not going to cut out the silence.
Don't cut out the silence.
No, it makes it more authentic. I don't want to lose authenticity. All right. So, welcome back to another episode of Chit Chats, everybody. We have 2 guests on the show today who have been in episodes before. We have Mr. Quinton Gonzalez. Thank you for returning. And we have Skylar Toohey also returning. Thank you for being here, Skylar. But for the first time ever, we have Mr. Anthony. Can I say your last name? Do you give me permission to say your last name?
Yeah, sure.
Anthony Camacho in the episode today. Welcome.
Woo!
It's actually Anthony Johnson.
I want Anthony Camacho to watch this video and be like, "What the hell?"
Yeah, what? I should have not even clarified that it was something else. I should have just played it off like it was Anthony Camacho and just not
Anthony
just like
Camacho.
just completely
Yeah.
straight faced. Yeah. Well, we'll refer
Yeah.
to you as Anthony Camacho for the rest of the episode. So anyway,
All right, sounds good.
Yeah.
Or Padilla. I don't care.
or
Padilla, yeah.
Padilla. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Padilla, I mean.
No, it's fine. No, it's fine. It's Padilla, sure.
Uh,
All right. So, guys, I called you here today because I want to talk about a little game you may know as Dungeons and Dragons, a tabletop game that you guys may be acquainted with in some capacity.
Remind me.
It's just a little game, kind of niche. Not many people know about it. It's a tabletop RPG where you role play as characters in a very mystical world, and there's combat, there's different characters, and honestly, I feel like if anything, you should explain this, Quinton, because we've actually done an episode in the past where I interviewed you about D&D. So why don't you kind of like give like your best explanation as to what D&D is? If you don't mind.
Sure. Okay. Dungeons and Dragons is a tabletop RPG, which means that most of the time it's going to be played in a physical format, or more of I should say an imaginative space where there isn't really any like video game or movie or like any sort of like media space that you play. It's mostly in the realm of imagination. Sometimes people use mats or whatever, but it is a RPG where people will create characters with intriguing backstories and other sort of things, and they have a game master or dungeon master sort of lead them through an adventure or story of some sort that either is a adventure or story that the game master made themselves, or maybe they're reading off of a module, where Dungeons and Dragons specifically tends to be in a more medieval fantasy space, where there are a lot of other TTRPGs that have like more sci-fi and stuff like that, but Dungeons and Dragons typically have, hence the name, Dungeons and Dragons, and you'll be dungeon delving, fighting dragons, fighting all sorts of monsters, and role-playing together, and it's all very fun. It's supposed to be a collaborative experience where the dungeon master tends to throw obstacles in front of the player's way, and the players have to work together to find a solution.
Yes. And specifically, Quinton, you are very well versed. Well, you've been, both a player and a dungeon master in the past. So you can kind of speak from both of those experiences. And Skylar and Anthony, you guys, I don't know specifically how much experience you guys have in terms of being a dungeon master, but I know that you have both been players in many a campaign before. And I basically just wanted to talk to all of you guys about like what just kind of like what that experience has been, because at the time that we're recording this, I think it's been about 3 years maybe since, like, I know that like Quinton and Skylar and I actually played for a little bit with you guys. It's been about 3 years since I remember we started. But Anthony, how long has specifically how long have you played now, would you say?
I'd say it'd been around like 3 years.
Oh, it's been about 3 years for you too?
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha. Okay, so similar amount of experience. And Quinton, when I first interviewed you a couple years ago, it had been about a year, I think. But I kind of wanted to talk about maybe what with you, what has kind of changed, what things you've learned in that time period since the last time that we talked about it, and overall just different sort of experiences that you guys want to share. So I guess right off the bat, let's just start what got you interested in playing D&D. So Quinton, why don't you start? What made you interested in it?
Yeah, so for the longest time, especially when I was growing up, D&D was considered the nerdy thing. That's the bottom of the barrel, sort of sure, you can play video games, you could read books or whatever. You could be into Star Wars, that's nerdy or whatever. But once you hit Dungeons and Dragons level, that's when you're the dweebazoid kind of guy.
Yeah, for whatever reason, it's on another level, right? Or it's
yeah, because the way a lot of times media convey it is that it's this super rules heavy, nerd calculating event. And I think the biggest example that I can think off the top of my head is how Big Bang Theory kind of conveys Dungeons and Dragons. In fact, there's even a SpongeBob episode that conveys Dungeons and Dragons. as well. So I remember for the longest time I was not into D&D because I just remember it was just this nerdy thing that I want to stay away from. Sure, I play video games. Sure, I like reading books, but like I'm not Dungeons and Dragons level of nerdy. That's just nerdy.
Mm.
And eventually, as I grew up, I was like, I want to try it. I want to see what it's like. I remember, funny enough, I think my first introduction to it was Overwatch 1, sort of, where the voice actor of Jesse McCree, now known as Cole Cassidy, was like a very prominent voice. Is what everyone loved Matt Mercer's voice, and I was like, oh, Matt Mercer seems like a cool guy. And then I remember he was a part of a Dungeons and Dragons group known as Critical Role, and I was like, okay, so he's that kind of nerd. And I remember watching one of the episodes, and I was like, it looks like they're having a lot of fun. And then I was like, well, I want to try it with my friends, see if we can get some fun out of it. And I remember going into it, I was like, I do not want to be rules heavy whatsoever. I really want to just be like, let's just try it. I am going to try not to read the rules too much and just go through with it. So I got the gang together to play Dungeons and Dragons. It seemed like no one really had too much interest in being the DM, so I kind of picked up that role, which is fine. I like being the DM a lot, but so I picked up DM. And we Dungeons and Dragons. That's a verb now, and that's kind of how it started.
Right. Yeah. And so
It was very long.
no, and that's okay. Well, I mean, like, and it is interesting because like you did kind of like take up that role, as the DM, and so like you've had like a lot of time to get that experience that not as many people might have. Skylar and Anthony, like you guys have definitely. I think like, would you say it's not a stretch for me to say that you've had a lot more experience being a player than a DM between the both of you?
For sure.
Mm-hmm.
I've only been a player pretty much.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, what about you, Anthony?
I think there's just like different perspectives.
Mm-hmm.
Being a DM is a lot different than just being a player.
Mm-hmm.
And being a player, like there's less to manage, basically. But that's just how it is as a player.
Well, and
but you still take notes though.
Right. Yeah, and I think what's interesting is that no matter what side of the coin you're on, like there is like different types of work that goes into it. Like Quinton, we'll talk in a minute. We'll talk kind of like what kinds of things you have to do as a DM. But Skylar, why don't you for you, like what kind of things do you kind of have to provide as a player? Like what's your sort of role, or how do you see it?
So the player is supposed to provide like a perspective in the DM's world, because like without the players, like there's no way to progress, there's no way to storytell unless if you're just writing a book. There's they're just meant. I mean, and also like the perspective or the role of the player kind of depends, because like they could be heroes, they could be like they could be villains. It's just so on and so forth. That's.
And
I think it really sums it up.
Yeah, well, and, there's different aspects of like players, right? Like there's there's different classes, there's different races, there's the whole concept of a character sheet, which kind of like makes each character distinct from one another, right? And so like that's from my perspective, as I would say I have a more limited viewpoint of D&D from you guys, but from what I can see, like there is a lot of that like individual kind of taste that you put into your own character that kind of it could be based off of the DM's world, but it kind of like adds a new sort of spin on it. Would you say that's fairly true? Yeah.
Which most DMs usually tend to work into their world into their worlds, which it's really cool. Like just for the player and for the DM to just have like just that sort of connection. I guess it's just fun. It's really fun to just it's storytelling together. That's basically it.
It's collaborative.
Definitely. And yeah.
And so Anthony, like what what is like how has being a player been for you? Like what have you kind of like thought about it in your time being players in different campaigns overall?
Well, I've mostly been in Quinton's campaigns, so I've had a lot of fun as a player because I could just like go somewhere and just like talk to a random NPC, and they're like, "Oh, hey, I'm Random Joe over here," and I really enjoy that because it's just so random.
I'm glad you didn't just say, "Yeah, I've been in a lot of Quinton's campaigns, and they've all been pretty bad." You know, no. It seems like you guys like because like you guys play a lot at our place, and I see that a lot, and it seems like pretty much all the time like you guys are either in like a like you know kind of like a serious mindset, like you're very focused in, or you guys are just like laughing a bunch and just like having a lot of fun.
There's like a lot of like that like serious moments, and then there's a lot of like silly moments in the campaign,
right?
And I like that mix.
Yeah, well, it's cool to like see the serious moments that you guys have, because it kind of to me just like communicates that you guys are very invested in what's happening, and you guys are like trying to like really think through like the scenario that you're in, and I think that's like it's cool to like kind of find yourself immersed in this sort of like you know in this game that you guys are playing, you know, almost like it crosses the boundary of a game into like you know like you're envisioning as if it was happening for real, you know what I mean?
Yeah, and he really knows how to like paint a picture too in his campaigns, and I like that, like the way he describes stuff. Like most DMs should like do that, and it makes it a lot more immersive, so we can have those serious moments.
For sure. And Quinton, from your perspective, like being a DM, like you've taken up that role like for you know multiple campaigns, you know, like for campaigns that have run on for such a long time, like. What, you know, kind of starting out, what was that like, and how does that compare to like now after you've done it for so long?
Starting out was very chaotic. I think the first campaign I ran was a lot of everything. I don't regret it at all, but it was hard because I was still trying to get my bearings on what I wanted out of D&D. I couldn't really tell if I really wanted a more serious atmosphere, so I remember the first campaign going very chaotic, and it was very jumbled
experimental
everywhere.
For sure.
Yeah, it was very that's a good word, experimental, because I didn't have a good grasp on the rules. No matter how much I read the player's handbook or the dungeon master's guide, the rules still felt confusing to me, and it felt like I just really needed to like see it in action to really know how the rules actually work. And eventually, I think throughout that campaign, I tried getting my players to, because I remember in the beginning we kind of had our session 0 and we made our characters, and it was kind of just like, oh, this class hasn't been picked yet, so I'm going to pick this class, or oh, this race hasn't been picked yet, so I'm going to pick this race. And it felt like a lot of us were kind of just picking things that felt like we not what we wanted, but what we needed for the whole composition of the party, which is fine if that's how we want to play. But
I can see how that
throughout, I was like,
that might have felt a little less like personal, or a little less.
It felt like there was no nothing being drawn, nothing being connected from the player and their character. Because it just felt like they were all just kind of, it was like when I was imagining them playing, it was just themselves. They were playing themselves, but maybe like in wizard robes, or they're playing themselves, but they were shirtless because they're a barbarian or something. And it just felt like I had a hard time disconnecting the player from the character. And I remember going, how can I try to help my players create characters that like feel like they're in there, feel immersive and stuff like that. And eventually I learned these tools and techniques on how to like help people create backstories, help people create like characters, giving examples. And I think not just my players, but myself, we've all grown a lot ever since that first experimental campaign on how we create characters, how they can tie into the world. Because originally I was just reading off a book, a module for the campaign. So I had a harder time sort of feeling like the work was mine. Like I tried putting my own twist on it, and sure, it was fun, but it just didn't feel like it was my work. It didn't feel like I could tie my players' stuff into the story. And I still think modules are very fun. They're very interesting. They're created to sort of just like dive into something and feel the story out. And but what I wanted when I started my second campaign, that campaign was completely written by me, completely homebrew. And my sole objective was I wanted to make a story that my characters had most of their, like they were the reason why the story was happening. That's what I wanted. I wanted this story to be about them. So I tried my best to do that. And I still think I still have a lot to learn, but I really enjoy being a DM. Like I think one of my favorite things about being a dungeon master is creating a story for people to enjoy. I think that's always been sort of something I've really enjoyed, is creating pieces of work for others to sort of consume. And I've been able to do that pretty well as a dungeon master, and I've been really enjoying it.
Yeah, for sure. And that's what I think is like so cool about like having that role as a DM, is that it is kind of like you kind of get to guide the scenarios, but also like, you know, there is like obviously a lot of player involvement in how those play out. And I see that with you. Like you will obviously have like things in mind, but you will kind of like take what the decisions that like your players will make, or like their characters, and you'll kind of like mold your vision into something that fits more with like what they're thinking, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, so like Skylar, for you, like what is that kind of experience like when you are like, you know, involved in a campaign that's made by Quinton? Like what is it like for you to kind of adjust or potentially like make a character, or you know, adjust your character to kind of like fit in that role, or like what is that kind of like experience like?
So so going from campaign 1 to campaign 2, it was a bit of an adjustment because that was the first time I ever had to actually create a character with a backstory that actually like fit in the world. And so it's kind of hard because you know, I mean, looking back on it, I'm not very proud of my backstory too much, but like but at the time I was proud of it. It adjusting into campaign 2 was just a doozy. But as soon as, and also like for a while actually, I had a lot of I maybe still have character identity issues with him. So it's because I kind of like had that same philosophy of I was kind of just playing myself a bit, but just learning to adjust. And I feel like I'm not or what was the question again? Because I feel like
I mean, you're answering the question. I basically was just kind of like asking like how has it been like, you know, like making a character in Quinton's world, and like you know, how has that like sort of just what has that experience been, you know, at the end of it. And it sounds like, you know, it sounds like it's definitely hard, like it's, you know, like maybe in the beginning, or you know, even like going to now, like there is kind of like a challenge in finding that that sort of you know, division between playing kind of like a character that's similar to yourself, and or like more so trying to get into a character that's separate, you know, like like, you know, role playing essentially, right?
Mm-hmm.
Would you say like you're definitely like have improved over time?
Oh, I feel like I've gotten so much better. Like even now, I come up with character ideas and concepts, and I constantly think about new characters that I could play or want to play. Like like everybody's got to start somewhere. Like how campaign 1 was. Like Quinton's start was brand new to DMing. Everybody like didn't know how to play Dungeons and Dragons. Like my first campaign character was literally like a mess. Like I was kind of.
I don't think you were alone. I don't think you were alone in that. I think we all, you know, like it was experimental, like I said. Like, we had characters that were just named kind of after ourselves. We had characters that were, named after memes. Like there was some growing pains.
And yeah,
Yeah.
I just want to say that that's completely okay. Like, don't something I don't want people to take off of this is that creating a character should be difficult, and you need to put so much energy and effort into it. You can there's several tools that you can use to create a character, as well as just like working with the DM. If the DM is like well versed enough with DMing, they might be able to already have like a backstory for you, and you just have to sort of fill in the lines. I do love the struggle. I barely play as a player, unfortunately, and I've always been wanting to, but I do kind of like the struggle of trying to create a perfect character, but that's completely not needed. You can, a lot of times I hear a lot of people say, oh, I want to try D&D, but I just don't know if I can really invest my time into it. But there are a lot of like ways that you could just jump into D&D, especially with modules, character creations. There's pre-made character sheets that you could either use or just like take inspiration from. D&D gives back as much energy as you put in. So like you could spend hours working on this character or spend days working on this character, or you can just jump right in the day of, say, hey, I want to play this very angry barbarian man, and he just gets angry when everyone calls him small because he's a gnome or something. And boom, there's your character right there. You have you have a personality, you have a character right off the bat. Or you could think of like a character with a tragic backstory and stuff like that. It's really the great thing about D&D is it's exactly what you want it to be, since there's no like coding or rule or like big rules on like how you make your character. It's exactly how you want it to be. I do think my group definitely likes more like role play intensive, so we do tend to want to make characters that have more oomph in their backstory. But D&D can be whatever you want it to be, and I think it's just as easy or as difficult as you want it to be.
Yeah, I do think like for a while I kind of felt like, for myself personally, like there was more of a barrier to entry than I was like kind of comfortable with. But I just thought that was kind of like for me. But even like looking back and like kind of looking at it now, like it's exactly like you said, like D&D is such an expansive and like sort of flexible game. Like you really can like kind of play by your own sort of rules. And I think what's cool is like you guys have, like you can obviously play by your own rules, but you guys have kind of like found your sort of like specific play style that's kind of unique to your group, or in just general, just like how you guys like to play. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And that's like, and that's okay. And that's like, that's part of the fun, is that you all kind of like find the way that fits for your group. So I wanted to ask Anthony, like what is the experience been like for you being a player? Like, I know that a big aspect of like making a character is like writing the backstory, kind of like Skylar mentioned, and like Quinton talked about a little bit. Like what, like for you, like what is writing a backstory like for you? Like what is like, and how does that kind of add to your character?
Remember my first backstory was very bad. I don't know if I sent it to Quinton.
Did Quinton, did you work on it with him?
I remember him asking me quite a few questions, which is always appreciated. Is asking questions like, hey, does this fit for your world and stuff like that. So he did. Right. I remember him asking me a bunch of questions. Once again, he did send me a backstory for his first character, Isaac, but I don't know if this is the backstory he was talking about.
No, I meant like before
Isaac. No, I don't think I ever received that one.
No, that one is very bad. But I that was like my first one with him. Mm-hmm. It was online. Yeah. But I improved since then, and I always like to involve my character in the world, like his backstory and the character in general. Like, to me, that's like very fun to do, because it creates opportunities for the DM to like throw some stuff from his backstory at him.
And that's why you like talking to that's why, like, in this case, like, you wanted to talk to Quinton because you wanted to get his input about his world so you could write your backstory kind of with that in mind, right?
Yeah, just to be more involved with that character in certain like aspects.
Is it hard, like, creatively to come up with them, or is it kind of like once you kind of get the ball rolling, like it kind of comes sort of naturally?
It's kind of
What is that like?
Yeah, it's kind of both. I need like it just takes a little bit of time to get the ball rolling, and then once that goes, it gets easier. Yeah, but I find it very fun to like make a backstory. But what sucks is that when I'm into the campaign now, I'm thinking, oh man, I have all these other character concepts now.
Oh yeah,
You know?
Exactly, dude. I want to play them all.
That's the hard part about D&D, I think.
So it's kind of like, so it sounds like you find yourself, you have this character that you're kind of committed to, but you kind of want to like there's all these other ones that you want to like almost start on the side or alongside that one. Yeah. That makes sense. Skylar, would you say that's kind of you've had a similar experience with that?
Yeah, that's.
It's funny because even as a DM, I've always talked about how much I wanted to be a player because I have so many of these character concepts. But even as a DM, I always just like want to dish out a new character that I want to play so bad. Like even I love being a DM so much, but there is something different between being a player and like being able to be a character. Whereas a DM, I'm more of the overarching story and not really like a character that I can be a personal character too. So sometimes I think it's funny. This is kind of my coping for not being a player is I'll make a character and then I will throw it at the party as like an enemy.
Yeah. And I noticed that you do that because I always notice it's interesting just like from
Master Fighters.
it's interesting from a I guess audience perspective because I watching you guys kind of like get more and more into role play. Like, I hear you guys like put on like voices and kind of like demeanors that are different from like your own. And with Quinton, I notice you will like specifically like change your voice or the pitch of your voice a lot to like match whatever character you're trying to go for. Specifically, there's one character in particular that I hear you do quite often, and I always recognize him when he comes up.
I don't know who you're talking about.
Yeah.
He's like in every campaign that we do now. Like there's
he's a reoccurring character.
Yeah.
Is that like? Do you guys find that is that hard? Is that like? Has it gotten easier to do that kind of thing? Like Quinton, for you, like because you probably have to do it the most because you're like playing all these different people because you're the DM. You're like playing all these NPCs. Like, is it kind of hard to shift between them all the time?
To be completely honest, something I've always had difficulty in is talking. I call it talking to myself when in reality it's like two different characters, but they're trying to talk to each other. And it just feels so weird to me. It's like being like, hi, stuff like that. Or like, you murdered my sister. I didn't do anything, something like that. That's something that's still a huge obstacle in front of me that I really need to beat. But so far I've been purposely trying to create, try to weave past those scenarios where I don't need to have two NPCs talking to each other like that because it just feels so weird to me. But it's definitely a big obstacle in my way that I need to get in front of it or need to get past. And another obstacle is role playing in general. I think as much as like I'm trying to get out of my comfort zone and talk, and I think I do a somewhat good job. I still really want to do more voices. Like I think voices make characters seem so interesting and it really makes them stand out. And sure, I have that one go-to character that maybe I do well. But I still want to be able to just like swap between voices just like that. And even if, as Anthony said, Anthony wants to go talk to random Joe guy across the street. I want to be able to like prepare a voice for him right off the bat and make him be as interesting as a random Joe guy could be.
Yeah, he's not just any old Joe. He's random Joe.
Yeah, he's random Joe.
Random Joe.
Yeah, he's special. Yeah. So like All right, let's go down the line. I want to hear like what your guys' like favorite aspect of D&D is, and maybe that might be similar between more one or more of you guys. But I want to like if you had to pick like one reason for like someone else to join to like try out D&D, like what would you say? Like Sky, let's start with you. I want to hear from you first.
So I feel like the character customization and options are so like vast. Like you could create whatever you want. If you want to be a nerd, you could be a wizard. If you wanted to be a big strong guy, you could be a barbarian. There's literally like there's so much. Like the classes and races provide like this mold that you can easily put within the world, and it's there's just so much variety. That's I like it, especially when I keep coming back to character concepts, like I said earlier, like with like what if I played this wizard, or I just thought of a cool sorcerer, or like a fighter. It's like there's in I also we talked about how it's a little hard to start building characters. Like a little piece of advice that I've found that's helpful really quick is that it's easier if you just make the character like make the class or pick the class subclass and just map out what the race and stuff is before you even think about the backstory. So it just makes it so much easier. So yeah, that's my advice. And
so would you say overall the customizability of like your D&D experience is like what you would say is like your favorite aspect?
Yes, and also just being able to show off your character, show off what you've written for your backstory. It's just it's cool to like I'm excited whenever I get to show off my backstory for their campaign. So it's exciting. It's really cool to have an impact on what people play. Like I'm sorry, I'm going off a little tangent, but I really do appreciate how like our group is more role play intensive, because then it allows more like delving into each character, and I feel like we've taken the critical role pill. Like we are very role play intensive. Like maybe not to the to the quality of the voice actors, but it's still really fun.
For sure. Anthony, what would you say is your favorite aspect of the D&D experience?
I'm similar to like Skylar's view, like just making whatever character you want and just throwing it out there if the DM allows it. It's just is very fun. And just the story, like the role playing aspect, that's what also makes D&D like very like fun.
Mm-hmm.
And combat can be fun. Some of us aren't too into it, but a lot of us are into D&D combat. I'm kind of like all three. I like all of those things.
Mm-hmm.
Just
so you're kind of just like all around, like the whole experience just makes
everything.
Mm-hmm.
Just I like eating everything there is to offer.
Gotcha. You get one of everything at the buffet. That's the Anthony way. Okay.
That's what D&D is like. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, I got you.
That good old tavern perpetual stew. You just keep going. Get that.
Yep.
Made by the DM.
Yeah. And Mr. DM, what would you say is like your favorite aspect of D&D? Or do you
There's
just like
a lot. I like a lot of it, but I'm kind of tied between, as a DM, it's creating a story for people to enjoy. But I think my favorite part, like the thing that I think would sell, I could tell to someone who only wants to be a player or only wants to be DM or both, is the collaboration. I think just like there's so many things that you can do as like a group of friends, sure. But I think the collaboration of D&D makes it fun. You're all working together for a collective goal, and you all just have a great time. It's like your characters can have a great time, your players can have a great time. Normally, like if the dungeon master is, in my opinion, having like what I think, if the players are having a good time, the dungeon master should be having a good time, and that's something that I think maybe a lot of people could take for granted is that just being able to find a collective event that everyone could have a good time on. Like, sure, you can have those parties and get-togethers and play ruin friendships over Mario Party and stuff like that. But like, I think the collaboration of D&D, it's just all working together and having a great time. And I think that's my favorite part about D&D is the collaboration, just the working together, all talking, all having a great time, all telling each other's jokes, bouncing off each other. It's all just, I think that's what makes D&D the greatest for me.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I would personally rather ruin friendships in Mario. But that's just me, though. Yeah. But no, D&D sounds I guess kind of cool. No. Okay, so now I want to just hear, like, what has been the biggest challenge for you personally, for each of the three of you, and like how have you overcame it, or like how are you kind of working to overcome it? So like, Skylar, what has been the biggest challenge for you?
So
if there is any.
So it was honestly learning the game, because it's just like there's a lot to learn. There's so many systems. Like we didn't even learn until like a year or two in that you can only cast one spell per turn, which and then there's the spell rules it can be very complex for a new player. It's just there, but once you get past the learning curve and you start to understand the systems in the game and why they're there, like you can then or I feel like I've gotten to a point where I can think of like really great ways to use the rules to my advantage, or like come up with cool class combinations that that just work they work really good in conjunction with each other. So it's the learning curve is there, but it's if you just push through it, if you have a group of people who are also learning with you too, or people who can teach you, that's even better. So it's just I mean, you're playing D&D with a bunch of people. Like, I mean, hopefully they help you out. It's not like a free for all. It shouldn't be a free for all.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and that's, I think, what's cool about like the collaborative effort is that, you know, whether or not you're new or you're all learning or only like one of you is learning, like you're not alone, because obviously like you have a group of people that you're going through with. I think it's cool. So that's cool. Yeah. Anthony, what would you say has been your biggest kind of challenge in D&D?
I think voice acting, or actually role playing your character as well. Mm-hmm. It's been kind of hard to do that with, especially if it's a new character you made. You're like just feeling it out with that character. For me personally, I feel like druids are probably the hardest to roleplay as.
Is there a reason specifically for that?
Because I don't know how I could see them with like certain parties, you know, like certain parties like to kill a lot of things, and
they're just
I don't think
nature hippie people.
Yeah. They sometimes mesh well, but sometimes it's like, why are you here?
Okay, so
I do. Yeah. Oh, sorry. I do want to add on that another thing that's a little hard at first is like it can feel like kind of cringe to like try and voice act too, or get into your character at first, especially when you don't know the people, or it just feel weird. But with the right group of people, you shouldn't have to feel like that. So yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Definitely, yeah.
That's just my hard part, role playing.
Right. And how, like, do you kind of like practice, like what do you kind of do to kind of like you know, role play better? Like, do you have any like techniques, or do you just kind of like practice?
I practice like the voices.
Mm-hmm. And that could be like on your own time, or that could be just when you're playing, you know.
Kind of both, yeah. But mostly like you just kind of gotta play as the character, like think what they would do. Mm-hmm. And that makes it easier, especially with what the DM throws at you. You can kind of just adjust that character, right, to kind of fit in that role.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah.
Makes it easier.
hmm And so Quinton, maybe you can kind of speak from both your perspective as a player and a DM. Like, what has your biggest challenge been?
I think it's sort of it's kind of tied in with role playing and voice acting. I think it's keeping things immersive because personally I want things to feel kind of like it's weird to want fantasy to be realistic, but I want things to kind of make sense. Like you don't want like at level 1, you don't want a party to be like average Joe 1, average Joe 2, random Joe 3, and then a literal god. You know what I mean? Like that kind of breaks the immersion when you have a literal god with you at level 1.
Mhm.
It just feels a little weird to have that there. And I think mine is like trying to create a story and trying to create characters and NPCs that all kind of feel like they feel like they're there. And it's the same thing with role playing. I want the role playing and immersion to feel like they're what they would say in that moment. Like they're not going to be, even if I am trying to create a bright and cheery character, if they're a loved relative just recently died, they're probably not going to be bright and cheery at the moment and stuff like that. And I think it's, trying to find that balance between trying to create very interesting characters, trying to create really interesting stories, but still also trying to make it make sense. I think that's been my biggest challenge so far.
Yeah, I think, well, and I think that is like, I definitely see that. Like, you want, because it is, obviously, some people might kind of see it as like, oh, it's a fantasy world. Like, you should be able to do whatever you want. But I do think, like, it is kind of important to have, like, somewhat of a ground, like, you kind of ground yourself a little bit, because that kind of, I think, adds to the, enjoyment. Because if it's like, if there's no rules, then, like, what's the point? You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, yeah, I can definitely see how that would be, like, an important thing to keep in mind. And so is that kind of goes for you on both the DM spectrum and on the player spectrum? Because you have been a player, like, in some ways, you know what I mean? In some, like, you have been a player at some points, right?
I've been a player, albeit not very long. But I will say that is mostly my DM that's talking. But as a player too, I also want my character to not be, if we're starting at level 1, I don't want my character to be like the god of all creation and be the most powerful person in the world and only have like 5 hit points.
Yeah.
So, you know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. Sorry, I for whatever reason just now is when I noticed the capybara background, and it kind of like caught me off guard.
It's been there the whole time.
So you
that's funny.
Yeah, I don't know why I didn't like focus in on it until just now. And so you were talking about gods, and I just saw a capybara.
The capybara.
Yeah. Oh my god. Okay. Anyway,
He pulls up.
All right. Well, I think with that, I don't know. Like, I think that might be a good stopping point to just kind of tie things in here. But I guess like in general, like, are you got like what kind of things do you guys got going on, like, because you guys all have a D&D campaign together? Like, what things do you got going on that you're excited for? If you want to kind of like briefly talk about that.
Yeah. Recently, this is a little unfortunate. Recently, I've actually kind of postponed the campaign for a little bit,
Right.
just because I've kind of had a DM burnout. But I am seeing some other people step up to the plate and try their hand at being a DM, Mr. Anthony Camacho. So that's very exciting to see what it's like to see one of my players be a DM.
Yeah.
And also, there have been a few little hints I've been dropping recently that might be foreshadowing for something in the future. But I'm just excited for what the future holds.
Yeah. Well, and like I hope to see, regardless of who is like taking the DM mantle at the time, like, all of you guys continue to get together and have fun and improve your D&D experience. You know what I mean? Like that's going to be exciting and maybe even I could join, Yeah.
Lokavir?
Yeah. Lokavir could return. Yeah. Yeah, that could. That, you never know. You never know what could happen with that. Yeah.
The return of
Look for your
Yeah.
jump scare.
This is a teaser for that. Yeah. All right. Well, with that though, we're gonna end off this episode. So thank you guys for joining and talking about your D&D experiences. This has been fun. And Anthony, thank you for joining for your first ever episode. But yeah, with that, we'll see you guys on the next episode of Chit Chats.
Yeah.
Bye.
All right.
Make sure you like, subscribe, ring that bell, and as always, brother fist.
Now we do Brother Fist.
Brother fist.
Light for Anthony.
Yes.
Yeah.
What?